Welcome to my fellow girl bosses and boss babes. Today we are talking about MLMs and Mormons and why Utah is known as the scam capital of the world. Here are some videos from the last time I drove around Utah, and if you've ever driven down the I-15 which runs through Salt Lake and through Provo, you know that whether it's businesses or billboards, you see signs of MLMs essentially everywhere you go. Even when I went to Deseret Industries, which is basically the Mormon church-owned version of Goodwill, you find MLM merch and t-shirts and lunchboxes all throughout DI. According to this report in 2022, MLMs and similar types of businesses brought in $2.7 billion of earnings for Utahns. This report also says that globally in 2022, there were $10 billion of business done in revenue. As an ex-Mormon and as someone who lived in Utah for many years, I can definitely attest to the fact that MLMs and Mormons go hand in hand, and there's very specific reasons why this type of business thrives in Utah and amongst Mormons. If you don't know what an MLM is, which stands for multi-level marketing, or if you don't know what's the difference between an MLM and a pyramid scheme, I'm gonna get into all of that in this video. In this video, I'll talk about the cultural reasons behind why Mormons love MLMs, how the church's doctrine, like prosperity culture and the church's wealth, promotes that same mentality amongst members, and why this type of issue of MLMs and pyramid schemes affects Mormon women specifically. One of the largest and most famous Utah MLMs is called NuSkin, and wouldn't you know it, one of the co-founders' names is Stephen Lund, and he is currently in one of the highest positions of Mormon leadership. If you've ever watched a football game with BYU, Brigham Young is the Mormon Church's university, you might have seen that there's a big NuSkin branding logo in the stadium because the stadium was funded by NuSkin. So the relationships here between the church, the culture, the money are all very interwoven, and I'm going to explain those connections to you all today. The following is a scene from a movie that was made for Mormons by Mormons. It's called The RM. It's about a returned missionary who comes home from his mission and has to deal with kind of reintegrating into society, and it pokes fun at so many aspects of Mormon culture, and Mormons' participation in MLMs is no exception. So here's the scene where he walks in and sees his parents promoting an MLM.
As your downline increases, so does your monthly income.
All from common household products we use every day.
Oh, hi, Jared.
What's going on?
We're having a little meeting.
Are you guys doing NuSkin?
Jared, we don't use that word.
We're marketing LD3. Latter Day Discount Distributors.
I'll link that below if you want to go watch the entire movie because it actually is pretty funny, and if you've watched my content for a while, you'll probably get most of the jokes. I also love that they're like, we're not doing NuSkin because, you know, that's an MLM, we're doing this other thing, and he explains that as you get more of a downline, your income increases, which is the definition of an MLM hiding as a pyramid scheme, which is illegal. As a side note, I appreciate just how thorough they were with designing this home. They probably just literally used a real Mormon's home, because as he walks in, you can see a family portrait of everyone wearing white, which is the most common choice for a Utah family portrait. And as he's talking to them, there's a massive quilt behind him because quilting is a favorite Mormon hobby. And they end the meeting with eating their little cookies. You know, no drinks. They always have little sweets and treats at the end of Mormon meetings because that's the only vice you're allowed to have. To define what an MLM is, as I said, it stands for multi-level marketing. And typically when you get a product, you know, you need baking soda or lipstick or something, you go to the grocery store or to a department store, you go to a physical building, maybe you order it online, and you're buying it directly from the business. Multi-level marketing is different because typically instead of buying from a business with an online store or a brick and mortar store, you're buying that same product from a friend, somebody that you know, and it's person-to-person sales rather than business-to-person sales. The FTC has a great document summarizing MLMs and pyramid schemes and the difference between the two. MLMs are legal, but pyramid schemes are not legal. And the problem is, as we'll see in the case of a lot of these Mormon MLMs, is that often while a business will seem to be an MLM, which is legal, if they dig into the financials and they talk to the people who are part of the business, they'll discover it's actually a pyramid scheme. So the two are similar enough that often MLMs get outed as pyramid schemes and then are declared illegal or are fined by the government. In a legal MLM, you are selling products to your neighbors, your friends, your acquaintances. You are basically working as a contractor. You're not an employee. You're a participant in some way. You don't get benefits. You don't get a salary. You essentially earn money as you sell the products. According to this document from the FTC, you might think that with your willingness to work hard, you can earn substantial income through the MLM. In fact, most people who join MLMs and work hard make little or no money, and some of them lose money. So some MLMs are structured that you have to buy a bunch of the product and then go sell it. And so a lot of people are left holding the bag because they've bought $10,000 worth of LipSense lipstick, and then because they're not able to sell it, they've essentially become the customer because LipSense already got their money. They can't sell to anyone else because nobody wants the lipstick, and so instead of earning money and starting a business, they're left with debt from acquiring a huge amount of lipstick they can't sell. That seems to be a very common outcome of MLMs, is that people either make no money, make a tiny bit of money, and do a lot of work, or the worst case scenario is they lose a lot of their money. A crazy aspect of MLMs is that in that case of buying the lipstick, often they don't allow you to return the product to the business. So there's no returns. They do not allow, I don't know for LipSense specifically, but a lot of MLMs, they do not allow you to return the product, which means that if you can't sell the product, you're truly out of luck. You just have to, hold the product. You have to, I guess you can use the product. Hopefully it's somewhat useful. You bought $10,000 worth of toilet paper rather than lipstick. But that's another thing this FTC document notes, which is that often when you buy product from this MLM, they're not going to let you return it. So you better make sure you can sell it or else you're just going to lose your money. So that's an MLM and it's legal. As long as you are person to person selling products, the government considers that to be legal, which is why there are so many MLMs in Utah. But the problem is that often something parading as an MLM turns out to be a pyramid scheme. In an MLM, the main way you make money is through selling products. In a pyramid scheme, the main way you make money is by finding other people to sell the products and then earning money off of getting new recruits. A sure sign of a pyramid scheme is if you're offered more money just to find new recruits versus selling the product that the MLM has. So, maybe you can make 50 cents or $10 from selling some leggings, but you can earn $500 by recruiting a new person to participate in the MLM. And so if you make more money by just getting new recruits than you do by selling the actual product, that's a sign you're in a pyramid scheme. Let's go back and re-listen to that one clip where he's describing what LD3 does and figure out if it's an MLM or if it's a pyramid scheme.
So, as your downline increases, so does your monthly income.
All from common household products.
So, as your downstream increases, you get more people joining, your income goes up. So, he's highlighting the fact that as you get more members, you make more money off those members. He is, in fact, describing a pyramid scheme, which means they are involved in something that is technically considered to be illegal. So, to tie a bow on it, the way you make money in a legal MLM is by selling products to your friends and family and acquaintances, and the way you make money in an illegal pyramid scheme is by recruiting new members, not by just simply selling the product. The irony is that the Mormon church is structured like a pyramid scheme to begin with, because they do a ton of missionary work. There's over 60,000 Mormon missionaries going knocking on doors. They knock on the doors, they get to know you, they love bomb you, they're friendly to you, they ask about your kids, they ask about your hobbies, and then they get you to join, and then BYU start paying 10% of your income to the church. Of course, they're a religion, so they are not subject to the same type of scrutiny as something that is saying it's a business, but this is still the way the church has grown, is that it is engaging in getting members to get more members, and then more members, and that pyramid that we saw in the video, which is that the top person goes and gets more members, is legitimately how the church operates. Of course, another difference is that Mormon missionaries aren't paid to recruit new people. You actually have to pay to serve a Mormon mission. You don't get compensated for your labor, you pay to do it. But as a little kid, I legitimately always had a copy of the Book of Mormon in my backpack, along with a special note in the beginning that says, this is how important this book is. It's the most correct book of any book on earth. I basically had an MLM mentality where I was constantly on the lookout for more recruits to my religion. As I was making this outline, I could quickly and easily remember just how many times I saw people involved in MLMs in the church. Before I deleted my old Facebook, I used to get DMs from old female friends constantly, and it was always honestly very deceptive and scammy, and it was always really frustrating because typically the approach would be something really friendly. So, hey girly, hey girl boss, I saw you just posted, they'd reference, I saw you just posted a cute picture of your kids, or I saw you just graduated, or I love the outfit you just posted, you're so beautiful. Something really friendly, and also usually something that made it clear they had kind of Facebook stalked you first. And sometimes they would let it get 10 to 15 messages in where you just, you're feeling a little like, wow, this old friend is reconnecting with me. It's so cool that she's reaching out to me. You're looking at her Facebook and you're saying, oh, I saw you just, you just moved to whatever. And you're engaging in, this old acquaintance is, looking to reach out and looking to make a friend. And so I remember having this experience of this false friendliness multiple times where they would message back quite a bit, maybe even over 3 or 4 days. And then finally after, 15 or 20 messages, they give you the actual pitch, the real reason they've started messaging you, which is to say, I've been selling this Tupperware or these leggings or these essential oils, and I think your family would just love these oils. They're so healing, they're so amazing. I use them for potty training or my headaches and any ailment under the sun. And then they basically pitch you after many, many messages of showing what seemed to be sincere interest in your life. It also kind of sucks because then if anyone reaches out to you back from your, previous phases of life, from high school or from, college or whatever, I started just having this immediate sense of, she's gonna pitch to me, so I'm not even gonna respond, or I'll just respond once with something, great to talk, and then stop responding. So it kind of made me hyper aware of this trend where girls from BYU, girls from my old wards or congregations would message me and I would just immediately know what they were after, and so I just wouldn't respond. To give just a few real life examples of when I was growing up in the church, I lived in Kentucky for a while. There was a family that was very into LuLaRoe leggings, and I got pitched on LuLaRoe, which their leggings are so ugly I never was interested to begin with. I had a mission companion who was obsessed with doTERRA, which is an essential oils company, which is a Mormon. LuLaRoe is Mormon, doTERRA is also Mormon, and she would tell me all of this science about how the doTERRA oils could get into your skin so quickly and how healing they were. And she had this is also very common to mix them in a special recipe that is, this is a headache recipe or this is a stress recipe, and they're all just random like lavender and sage and I don't know, but it's never actually scientifically proven. It's just anecdotal evidence. There was also a woman in my congregation when I lived in Texas who was obsessed with Scentsy, which is a wax melting product, and Scentsy is also owned by Mormons. And I remember she got in, this is also common with MLMs. The people who get in really early make a ton more money than the people who join a little bit later, which is also kind of another sign of that it's a pyramid scheme, because different people, depending on when they joined and where they fit in the hierarchy, will earn more or less money. So she got in kind of early. And if I remember correctly, they bought a new house, they had new cars, and it was this massive thing within our congregation where this fairly typical middle class family was suddenly seeming like they were ultra rich. Also, Also, when I was at BYU, Lip Sense, which is a type of lipstick that isn't supposed to come off, they had a lot of really popular advertisements of people putting the Lip Sense lipstick on, and then they like try to rub it off and it won't come off. Lip Sense is another Mormon company, and I had a girl who brought me the lipstick, showed me the lipsticks, I tried them on, and I didn't end up buying any, because they were pretty expensive for a college student, but I remember another friend did buy them, and she was really frustrated because you literally really couldn't get it off. So she'd be trying to go to bed and she's like, okay, the biggest selling point of it not coming off is it literally won't come off. I have shared in other videos about how there are kind of different sub-genres of Mormons. There's the Mormons we see in Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, which is the Botox Mormons, the lip filler, the hair extensions, the, beauty and faith should show in your countenance, so you need to look as hot as possible. So that's one type of Mormons. There's the prepper Mormons who have tons of food storage. They have 72-hour kits. They have emergency plans. I talked about them in this video, and this video is about MLM Mormons, which is a whole new subgenre of Mormons who are obsessed with getting rich quick, hustle culture, grind set culture, and people who are generally more focused on the prosperity doctrine version of Mormonism. Before we continue, just a quick reminder to like this video, subscribe to my channel. If you hit the bell button, then it will give you a notification for whenever I post a new video. I typically post a new video about the Mormon Church every Friday, my experience, Mormon doctrine, Mormon history, so consider clicking that subscribe button if you want to see more. There are truly so many MLMs in Utah that it is almost impossible, that could be its own video, is just listing all of the MLMs and not only listing them, but also going into all of the litigation and small claims court and class action lawsuits and FTC violations. I'm not going to go super deep into it for this video because there's so much there that I truly could probably just read off a list for hours and hours of the many, many MLMs that have been attempted to be founded in Utah and just in the country in general. It is shocking to find how often, if you Google MLM name, scam, NuSkin scam, or Young Living violation, insert any MLM and then, controversy, you will basically find associated with every single one of these MLMs some version of a warning or citation or court case where they've all been involved in people trying to take them to court in some way or write a letter or do something to just say, this is a scam. This document, which I showed at the beginning, has a list at the bottom of all of the MLMs in Utah. They also refer to it as direct selling industry. There's a lot of different names that is used for this type of business model. The most commonly known one is MLMs. Here's a list of some of the biggest MLMs in Utah. First, we have doTERRA. This is an essential oils company. That's what they're most known for. The FTC took action against them during COVID because they made some false health claims about the magical medicinal powers of their oils. So that's one of their most recent scandals. We also have Young Living, which is another essential oils company. Young Living especially sticks out in my mind. Last time I was in Utah, I took these videos. They have this massive compound in Utah where they have like knights jousting arena, and they have lavender fields. They have massive, huge Clydesdale horses and this big horse barn. They have those little duck boats that it looks like a duck and you paddle the duck boat. And it's just this massive compound where you can go and walk around. They have lots of little community events there. And it's all just founded by Young Living. It's just truly massive. Going out there, you feel like you truly start to understand the scale of their wealth. For this video, I did buy this essential oils thing from Young Living just because I was like, I gotta show one of the products. And guess how much this was? I was kind of like, I don't need to buy that. And this is, there's a variance of costs. The different oils will cost different amounts of money. But this tiny little vial was $56 on Amazon. And it doesn't, I guess you're just supposed to know what it does because it doesn't tell you what it's for. The directions say dilute 1 drop with 4 drops of olive oil, apply to desired area as needed. So that it doesn't even, at least on the bottle and on the Amazon listing, it doesn't really tell you what the fuck it's supposed to be for. I will say on the Amazon listing, it does say some things, but none of these are health related. It is mostly saying it smells good. You know, you can put it in baking soda to neutralize pet odors, can enjoy it in the fall. So this one doesn't have any specific health claims. It seems that maybe they've gotten, you know, not just Young Living, but doTERRA and other essential oil companies have been investigated so many times by different federal agencies that they finally just said, we can't make any public health claims about these products. Speaking of health claims, Young Living did get a warning letter from the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. I'll put it over to the side here, essentially saying that they are marketing their products as if they are medicines, but medicines are regulated by the government, so you can't actually advertise that something has a medicinal power unless it's a medicine, and if it is a medicine, it has to be regulated by the government because medicines are something that people take pretty seriously if it is legitimately medicine. One of my favorite musicians, his name is Tim Minchin, and in this song he says that, you know what alternative medicine is called if it's been proven to work? Medicine. It is funny that this specific essential oil I bought was mentioned in this letter from the FDA. It says that they used to advertise that thieves could be used for a head cold, sneezing, watering eyes, runny or stuffed nose, even body aches. That claim that I just read was on a seller's social media page. So even though the company wasn't making the health claim, the sellers were making the health claim, and as a formal representative of the company, they're still going to be held to the same standard. So if they're claiming this is medicine, as a representative of the company, they are still being called out to say, hey, you can't just make these health claims. You can't just say, if I put some of this under my tongue all day long and an overdose of Young Living vitamin C, I'm ready to beat the cold and flu season. DM me. And so that is another issue that seems common within MLMs, is that the person that's selling the product will make unfounded claims, and the company still has to be held accountable for claims made by its representatives. So go check out this letter if you want to learn a little bit more about Young Living. The warning essentially said that they were illegally marketing some of their products as treatments for diseases without FDA approval. Another MLM that I've already mentioned is NuSkin. This is the same MLM that was founded by the high-up Mormon leader. NuSkin, of course, has also been fined multiple times. They had a $540,000 fine from Chinese regulators and a $750,000 fine from the SEC. In addition to that, they had a $47 million class action settlement in 2016. So in a lot of these MLMs, if you look into them, it's just a peppering of just, you know, all these different types of forms of lawsuits, whether it's, you know, illegal marketing, it's a class action lawsuit of people saying they didn't, you know, that it didn't work for them. Sometimes it's a claim around the people who were selling the products, who were duped into thinking they could make more money than they could. So it's really just the complaints are coming from all directions for a lot of these companies. LuLaRoe is another one I've already mentioned. I highly suggest checking out the documentary LuLaRich, and this was also founded by members of the Mormon Church, and in the documentary they also speak specifically to their membership in the church, their prosperity doctrine, their desire to get specifically women involved in selling the leggings, and why they believed that women were kind of their key to the business's success. One woman also talks about how they used verses from the Book of Mormon in their selling pitch, and this is also a very common theme throughout this Mormon MLM topic, which is people using the language and culture and belief system of the church to legitimize the product and the MLM that they're a part of. I'll get more into that in a bit. The final one I wanted to highlight is Herbalife. This is another Mormon-owned company, and it was also sued by the FTC. It settled with the FTC and agreed to pay $200 million to compensate customers and fundamentally restructure the business. From my research, it seems that Herbalife was basically doing what I already talked about at the beginning, where they were saying they were an MLM, but they were actually operating as a pyramid scheme. In their promotional materials, they said things like, "The days when I could earn a living cleaning houses are behind me. When we worked in factories, our earnings could only pay for basic needs, but now we can take our 12 grandkids on vacations." On this blog post, it says, hundreds of thousands of people signed on for Herbalife's business opportunity, but most people made little or no money. It's crazy because it says half of Herbalife's sales sales leaders earned less than $5 a month on average from selling the product. So they're in the promotional materials, they're saying, hey, you can take your 12 grandkids on vacation if you get involved in this. And then the lived reality is that many people are making $5 a month by being involved in this business. Now, let's get into the analysis as to why this is particularly a Mormon issue. What is it about this religion that makes people so easily duped by pyramid schemes and MLMs? This is obviously cultural commentary, so it's a bit more of a soft science, but as an ex-Mormon, I can definitely say that there are lots of things to point to where the culture of the church, and especially the culture of the church in Utah specifically, is highly complementary to these types of systems. The first thing to point to is that Mormons live in a high-trust society, specifically within the church. So growing up, I could never go to sleepovers really at anyone's house, but if they were Mormon, I could go to a sleepover at their house. And a very common question when you ask, hey, can I go to my friend's house is, but are they members? Because that is the sign of if we can trust them or not. This is also why garment checking, which I talked about in my video about wearing Mormon underwear called garments, garment checking is very common because they basically want to see if you're active, if you're part of the club, if you have made those sacred promises in a Mormon temple. And if you're wearing garments, it's basically a free pass to say, I trust you implicitly because we not just belong to the same religion, but we've both completed the temple endowment, which is the highest standard of worthiness within the church. So it's not even just that you're Mormon, it's that you have a temple recommend, the bishop said you were righteous, and you've achieved the highest level of righteousness within the religion. This means that when you're in, you're really in, but it also means that if someone can get in by lying or false pretenses, it's much easier to scam and to dupe people, because if a Mormon sees someone else is wearing garments, they are going to just inherently trust them so much more than an average person they might see walking on the street. Mormonism is also very built to trust someone's word, the anecdotes they share, the claims they make about the church, the claims they might make about a business. They'll trust someone's word, and they might not have the gut sense or the knee-jerk reaction to say, well, if I'm going to join a business, if I'm going to invest my money, I need to see some financials, I need to see, some documentation about how this business operates. That urge to basically fact check and do your own homework doesn't really exist in Mormonism. Keep in mind that as a member of this church, once a month, there's something called testimony meeting, which is a meeting where everybody takes a turn getting up in front of the congregation and bearing their testimony about the church and the gospel and God. So typically a testimony would go like this. I'd like to bear my testimony. I know this church is true. I know that Joseph Smith was a prophet of God. I know the Book of Mormon is the word of God. And I know that by attending the temple regularly, I've gotten closer to God, and I know that you can get closer to God too. And I just wanted to bear my testimony of those things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. So it's almost similar to a prayer, but it's more specifically saying aloud to your congregation, I would like to state, I believe in this religion. I'm a member of the religion. I'm promoting the religion. The religion has made a difference in my life. And often in a testimony, there's also some element of, and I know it can for you too. And this is not something that people memorize. It's off the cusp, but there are usually specific elements like bearing testimony of God, Jesus Christ, Joseph Smith, the temple, Book of Mormon. Those elements are very common within Mormon testimony meetings. And so it was especially interesting in different stories I read about MLMs to see how often testimony meeting vibes are brought to MLM pitches. So in the same way, in your church, you're getting up and saying, I know this church is true. You are bringing your little essential oils and you're saying, I know, I testify that this will keep your family safe. And you're making these same big, bold claims, these I know statements, but now you're just saying them about a product instead of saying them about your church. It's very much based in this faith language of, I have faith that this will work for you. I have faith, on my mission, I used to say, I have faith that if you join the church, you'll see blessings in your life. And that same faith language of I believe, I know, I testify is very powerful when you take it from church into this conversation about lip sense or leggings. I know these leggings are going to make you feel really good about yourself, and they're going to give you the confidence you need in order to get that promotion you're looking for at work. Just kidding. I don't know who's wearing leggings to try to get a promotion at work, but it really feeds into this naive sense that someone's word is law. In the Bible, in Matthew 18, it says that, "But if he will not hear, take with you one or two more, that by the mouth of two or three witness, every word may be established." And this is a very common missionary quote. If you're familiar with Mormon missionaries, they always travel in two. As a missionary, I memorized that scripture. Obviously, I no longer have it memorized. But just to say that the belief is, if you take this literally, and if you apply it to MLMs and selling products, that if you have two voices saying something's true, that's how you establish God's word. And so if you have, if you have one of these parties, these are, you probably noticed it in the RM, they're having a little MLM party. MLM parties are very common, and I've been invited to many of them. And when you go to an MLM party, they typically have 3 or 4 or even more people who are involved in the MLM who are saying, "Hey, brothers and sisters, I know this will change your life, and we bear witness that we have gotten financial security for our family. We've loved this product. It's made such a difference for our health, blah, 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 blah." And because this type of meeting is so common within the actual church service, it lends itself very well to an MLM pitch session party where you're taking the same structure of this meeting that feels very familiar to members, and you're simply substituting a product for the religion, and it sells very well. I truly think that if you've been duped and kind of brainwashed into believing one thing, the church, then it's pretty easy to get people on board with other versions of the same ideology and types of thinking. Just like the Mormon church encourages you to participate and you bear testimony and you are giving anecdotal evidence. And, it's very rare in the church for someone to say, "Why is there no historical proof that the Book of Mormon is a nonfiction book? Why have we not found swords and shields from the battles described between the Lamanites and the Nephites? Or why did we remove the thing about DNA evidence from the introduction of the Book of Mormon? Or why is it that Egyptologists disagree with Joseph Smith's translation of the papyri?" You don't hear people raising, even why does evolution not agree with the story of Adam and Eve? These are not things that you hear brought up within a Mormon context. Instead, what you're hearing is, "I know this is true. I believe it will change your life." And those claims are based in feelings, not in facts and science. And so, like I said, brainwashed once, brainwashed again, because members aren't taught to have the muscles to think critically about these types of things. Instead, if their best friend from church, someone from their congregation says, "I know this will change your life," they just believe it because they're a believing people. Another huge reason I thought of as to why MLMs are so potent in Utah is the way the Mormon church organizes its congregations. So in the Mormon church, a congregation is known as a ward, and there are usually maybe 5 to 7 wards or congregations in what's known as a stake. These wards, these congregations, are organized based on geography. So in a lot of people's minds, when you want to go to a church, maybe you're driving in the car, you see a pretty building, you're like, "Oh, it's whatever, evangelical, that's the type of church I'm looking for." And maybe you have an evangelical church closer to you, but you want to go to that one because maybe your friends go there or something. So that's, usually typically how people might choose to attend a church. Even within the same denomination, you can kind of pick and choose, like, "Oh, I like that pastor more. I like the the free coffee at that place more. You're basically allowed to choose. So that is not the case in the Mormon Church. It's much more like how United States school districts are organized, where your address determines where you're allowed to go. So I can't just take my kids to any school, any public school that I want. I have to look at my address. I can look up my school boundary, and then I can say, okay, my school is this address. We have to go to that school. Sometimes you can apply for, some exception, but that's typically how it goes. As a member of the church, you do not get to choose which congregation you take part in. It's all very, very rigid boundaries. And you can actually get in trouble with the church by trying to attend a different congregation than the one you're assigned to. What this means is that, especially in a place like Utah, where there are so many Mormons, you typically could have a ward or a congregation that is 5 blocks. So they'll just, there's such a high density of Mormons that the geographic boundaries of the wards are very small. So when I lived in Kentucky, our ward boundary was huge. I think it was an hour and a half from one edge of the boundary to the other, because there are so few Mormons in Kentucky that they have to draw the boundary lines really big to get enough Mormons to make a single congregation. However, in Utah, there are tons of Mormons, especially near Salt Lake City and along the I-15. So you typically have a ward that's just a few blocks. It'll be the Lehigh 3rd Ward, and there's 150 to 200 members, and it will just be one housing development. And so this means that you really know your neighbors very, very well. So you could say, that guy down the street is my bishop, that guy down the street is the ward clerk, that young woman is in my young women's group because I'm the young women's leader. And so it means that you are very, very closely knit into your geographic region and your neighborhood. In my experience, most people in the rest of America, you might know, your next door neighbors, you might know a few people in your neighborhood, but within the church, you may very well know almost exactly every single person in every single house near you, because they're all Mormon and they all go to the same congregation. The outcome of this is that if you have a product you want to sell, you truly have a built-in market in Utah, because not only do you know every single one of your neighbors, more or less, you also have a deep connection with them because you belong to the same religion. That religion has very high trust within its members, and you see them kind of all the time. You see them playing outside of their house, you see them at church, you see them at social activities, and all of the Mormons are all friends with each other. So it just means that, because it's multi-level marketing and your person-to-person sales, because you have this deep religious connection with your neighbors, and the church encourages a high trust within those neighbors, if someone comes to you and says, hey, do you want to buy this product? It's not just some random neighbor knocking on your door and you're like, oh, I can't believe the neighbors are bothering me. It's, your young women's leader, or it's your seminary teacher, or it's your bishop's wife, and you know them, you've interacted with them for years, and they're saying, hey, I believe this will change your life, and you're just very inclined to trust them and to go along with it. I think another reason MLMs have been so successful in the church is that the church has never really said, had any sort of talk or speech or press release where they've said, hey, don't participate in these types of businesses, because as the FTC says, most people lose money. Most people are unsuccessful. And there's just a very small percentage of people who are very, very successful, and they serve as kind of billboards for the rest of the group. Hey, look at so-and-so from my ward. They got rich doing this thing. I should do it too. But unfortunately, by the time some people are rich, most of the people who join after them are going to be the ones who are losing the money. And so some members may be interested in finding alternative medicine routes because they don't trust doctors or big pharma. They have the word of wisdom, which is rooted in, being as healthy as possible, no drinking, no tea, no coffee. And so I think that this means that members are more susceptible to alternative medicine health claims, and oils are used in the temple. So I've talked in the past about the washing and anointing ceremony, where they put water and oil on your head and they pronounce a blessing over your body. So they bless your nose, your eyes. I'll put the words up to here. side here, your mouth, your bowels, your breasts, your loins, and all of those things are being blessed with oil. So there is also a religious element to viewing oil as a tool for blessing. When someone is sick in the church, if you have an ailment or surgery or whatever the form the sickness takes, you can also get a blessing of healing. So it looks like this. Two or more men put their hands on your head, but first they put some drops of oil on the crown of your head. And that oil is specially blessed. Here's the blessing, to be used for blessings of healing. So the oil itself is blessed, and then they bring that blessed oil and they put it on your head, and then they bless you in a separate blessing. So this just means that in members' minds, there are multiple ties to oil being used as a tool for healing. Another huge reason that Mormons are susceptible to MLMs and choose to participate in this type of business is that Mormons typically have a massive amount of door-to-door sales experience. Almost every Mormon man has served a mission, the black name tags, and as part of that mission, you are asked to knock on doors, and more recently they have missionaries who have profiles on Facebook, and they are using the internet to do missionary work and pitch the gospel as well. And so this just means that for men and for women, men it's more required, women it's more of a, do it if you want to do it type of thing. But on both sides of the coin, you have people who have had significant experience with getting rejected, pitching multiple times, asking people to, if you consider the pitch to join the Mormon church a cold pitch on the door, you're knocking. This is a church that has polygamy and racism and sexism in its history. This is a church that you can't drink coffee. This is a church you have to give 10% of your income. You have to follow all of these rules. And so to try to get someone to join this church, you really have to bear strong testimony. You have to ask, that's why I use the term love bombing, which is very common. You're so special. We love you so much. And so it just means that members who are raised in the church and who have served missions are very comfortable with asking people to participate or join something. And this language of sales transfers very easly over to selling a product, to bringing up, hey, do you want to buy this? Just as kind of like a cold pitch, not, a warm pitch would be like someone has submitted an interest and you're going to them after they've expressed interest, versus a cold pitch is truly just you're walking up to someone. I literally would walk up to people in Target and say, hey, would you like a Book of Mormon? And I'm accosting someone while they're grocery shopping, and I'm comfortable doing that. So obviously, if you have a missionary mentality and you've now come home from your mission, that skill of just asking someone to buy something from you, which a lot of people might be kind of intimidated by, or just like, I don't really want to do that. It's something that missionaries are very comfortable with and really skilled at getting people to say yes. One example of a door-to-door company founded by Mormons is Vivint, and I'm sure that almost any American that could hear this video has probably had Vivint people come by. I live in Texas, but we still get them really probably once a month. We'll have a guy from Vivint knock, knock, knock. Do you want, and it's always we don't ever ask, are you Mormon? But Vivint is a Mormon founded company and they hire a lot of returned missionaries. On my mission, we would even use the term ABC, which is a specifically sales related term. And it means always be closing. I think too, the language of pitching the church can be used easily in sales because, on my mission, we were taught, don't take no for an answer, because keep in mind, if someone says no, they're essentially saying no to their own salvation. And so the stakes that are presented are very high. If we say, can we teach you about our church? No. Okay, well, can we leave you with a Book of Mormon? Can we leave you with our phone number? We're having a barbecue at our church in a few days. Do you want to come to that? Do you have kids? We have great youth programs. And even if they say no to one thing, you basically keep asking them different versions of, do you want to learn about the church? Until maybe you either hit on something that they're truly interested in, or they get so annoyed they just shut the door on you. And this was a very common tactic we used on my mission, which is, what about this? What about this? What about this? And this is also something that carries over very well to sales. Oh, well, you say you're not interested in learning more about our church. Do you believe in God? And, no, yes, I do believe in God. Well, we believe in God too. What a crazy connection we have here. And it's basically just this approach is take whatever they say and resolve concerns, use the script that's been given to you, try different ways of introducing, hey, maybe you'd like it for this reason. Maybe if you don't want this product for your health, maybe you want it because it will make it so your house doesn't smell bad because you can put it in this diffuser. It's basically an approach that means you just try every angle of selling this. And hopefully, eventually, after peppering them with all of these questions, you're going to find some entry point of why they might be interested. Another element as to why Mormon missions make MLMs so powerful and popular in a place like Utah is that it means that there are many, many different people who speak tons of different languages. So Mormon missionaries speak 50 plus languages. And so this means that in the middle of the US, along the Wasatch Mountains, there are people who speak tons and tons, there's people who speak Korean, Italian, Mandarin, name your language, they've probably learned it. And so this means it's more easy for you to scale your brand globally. This is another reason why call centers are super, super popular to be placed in Utah, even by non-Mormon companies, because you can find someone who can both speak English fluently and who can speak Korean or Japanese or French. You can find all of those languages in Utah. To quote from this article, it says, "It would be very difficult for doTERRA to experience the success it's had in any other state," Jower said of the essential oils company, which boasts more than 50,000 doTERRA consultants or wellness advocates in Utah alone. "We are able to run a global office out of Utah with 1,900 employees communicating in literally more than 100 languages. And in most, if you set that same office down in Texas or, maybe the only place that could rival that is probably New York with that many languages. And so Utah has this special advantage where not only are people very, very good at sales, they can do those sales in most major languages across the globe. In addition to commenting on the MLM phenomenon in the RM, which we watched at the beginning, there's also a storyline in this TV show Big Love. Big Love is about a man who has multiple wives in Utah, and they're Mormon-ish, but he's kind of has his wives in secret at the beginning. It's a great show. I should probably do a reaction to it sometime, but it's on my list. It's on my list. But one of the wives ends up getting involved in an MLM, and here is a snippet from the show.
Goji is a socially conscious company built on the same principles as our faith. It is our faith in action.
We like very much that this.
I love that she's using her testimony voice. It is our faith in action. And I've talked before about the kind of Mormon missionary voice, or some people call it a Relief Society voice or cult voice. But it's this, especially for women, it's this very baby, sincere, kind of quiet, whispery voice. So like I talked about testimony meetings earlier, this is when you give a testimony in the church, you're not just talking like I am now, where you're like, well, let me tell you a little bit about what I believe. You do see mirrored, so you see other people do it, and then you kind of bring that voice on yourself. I've shown this video before where I'm using the voice. I'll link it below. But it's basically this voice where you say, I know the church is true. And usually it's a little higher, it's quiet, whispery, and it's basically a voice that, in my opinion, it's almost meant to get people to have an emotional reaction to what you're saying, because it sounds like this really important secret that you just are sharing out and you're about to burst into tears because it's so meaningful to you. And I think that the use of that voice, and I love this, how this actress affects this voice here, because you can hear in it that she is using her testimony voice in order to sell this Goji product. With that, let's jump into why Mormon women specifically are more susceptible to get duped into joining MLMs and pyramid schemes. You may be familiar with the creator Jane Insane. She does a lot of skits that are essentially poking fun at the Utah mom and how obsessed with aesthetics the Utah mom is. Jane is also a member of the Mormon Church, so I think that that's another reason why she has such a great critical eye to the types of moms and women that are in this culture. I think you can point to so many things, from the extensions to the Stanley cups to the athleisure wear. The Mormon mom vibe and the aesthetics of what goes along with that is a very specific and particular look. I think her videos do show how much Mormons are pretty obsessed with image, looking beautiful, and not just looking beautiful, but specifically looking more beautiful than the woman next door, and being as rich and hot and looking like you have it all as much as possible. However, I think the flip side of this obsession with image is that you really do need a lot of money in order to keep up with this image. You know, even if you're just counting the amount of money it takes to have Botox, lip filler, lashes, hair extensions, hair dyed, nice clothes, that's just, even that is thousands of dollars. And then you need the big house, you need the 5 kids, you need the hot husband, you need the Pilates classes. This lifestyle is incredibly expensive. And so to achieve it, you really need a lot of money, especially if the woman is also staying at home. I think this culture of comparison and of competition means that a lot of women feel the need to have more money than their husband is bringing in. But also, they can't go back to work full time because having a full-time job as a mom of young kids is very stigmatized within the church, and especially in Utah. So it means they have to figure out a way that they can make money that doesn't require them to work outside of the home and get a babysitter or take their kids to daycare or something. And so that essentially means they can't get a full-time job, but they want to make money in some way. I think this need for money, but also to continue to stay at home, is why Mormon women so often turn to MLMs, because it doesn't require to go into an office to make money. They can stay at home. All they need is to be able to use their Facebook page, their Instagram, their texting, whatever. They just can use their phone to find people who will buy these products. So that's why, to go full circle, I would so constantly get DMs from women who I knew in previous wars or from BYU, because they were stay-at-home moms. They did not want to go back to work in order to make more money. And so the options of making money left to them are very few. And a favorite option seems to be to join an MLM and DM your old acquaintances from way back then and see if they want to buy your essential oils. And so honestly, as much as I think sometimes people like to dunk on women who are in MLMs and talk about how annoying they are, I will truly never take that stance, because I think when I see a woman joining an MLM, I often see a cry for help, in a sense, because clearly they don't have enough money. They're looking for a way to earn a side income. I've also met a lot of Mormon women and heard stories of women who the husband does not really let them have any power over the home's finances because it's his money. And so she'll get some sort of little allowance, or he oversees the budget and he'll say, well, here's the money for groceries. And she doesn't have true access to her own financial freedom, even if the husband makes a large amount of money. So this means that the only way she might be able to gain access to money is by doing something like an MLM, which will allow her to have the money get deposited into an account she has access to, and so that she has a little bit more financial freedom. I think a lot of these women just want their own income or their own pocket change to, buy some clothes with. I think also they often want their own identity outside of being a mom. They're looking for a way to feel successful in a realm outside of staying home with their kids. And so this gives them an opportunity to feel empowered and feel like, wow, look, I'm bringing in money, I'm helping the family, and I'm still a stay-at-home mom. And so I think that this making money while being a stay-at-home mom dynamic is very alluring to a lot of women. Unfortunately, though, as I've been saying, most people who are in MLMs make little money, no money, or they lose money. I think that these MLMs relying on stay-at-home moms is truly quite exploitative, because in reality, they're using unpaid labor to hawk these products, and they're luring these women in with promises of financial freedom. Hey, pay for more clothes for your kids, feel successful, own a business. They're using this boss babe feminist language into tricking women to do what is often simply unpaid labor. Another frustration I have is that Mormon women often have almost no financial literacy. So my upbringing in the church around financial literacy was very focused on saving money. So how to pinch pennies, how to, sew your own clothes, how to can your own food, how to budget at the grocery store. And that's a very female-centric version of learning about money. It's basically saying, hey, the man is making the money and your job is to save the money. But if you ask most Mormon women, especially who are probably younger than 30 years old, what a 401k is and how to set one up and why a 401k is important, they won't know. I would wager to bet they truly would not know. And I would put money on the fact that if you asked a man around the same age about that type of financial question, he would be much more likely to know. The same thing goes with the stock market. What is investing? What does retirement income look like? How much do you need to save and invest? And what's the difference between index funds and the S&P? And these are questions that are actually quite important so that you can save money for retirement, so that you're protecting your financial future. This is also important to know for in case of divorce. Each state's divorce laws are different. And so that means that the proceedings of who gets the money and who gets the assets in a divorce are going to be quite different depending on where you live. And these are the questions that actually protect women. They protect them in case of divorce. They protect their children. Being able to answer these types of questions is a much better type of financial literacy than understanding how to budget carefully and pick which produce is cheaper at the grocery store. Budgeting and pinching pennies is actually a service that complements a man's financial literacy better than the woman's own, because she's protecting his paycheck and making sure that even though they had all these kids, they don't spend too much money, and so that the family retains more of their income. So truly learning to budget and learning to pinch pennies, which is what I was taught and which you can find being promoted here in this manual I was taught from as a child and as a young girl, this is not financial literacy that is going to protect women or to make sure that they have a great retirement in case of divorce, or in case that they stay together and they're both making decisions about investing smartly in their future together. How this carries over to MLMs is that because women aren't told to educate themselves about how jobs work, how benefits work, and what's the difference between a contractor and a W-2 employee. Because women aren't educated about that type of thing, they're going to be more easily duped into putting their labor behind a type of job like an MLM position, which might have some flashy numbers up front, but in reality is often simply unpaid labor. Men, on the other hand, might recognize that a benefits package tied with your employment is a much better deal to the employee than this commission-based structure that MLMs so often operate off of. Unfortunately, though, when a woman is getting pitched to join an MLM, she likely has not been educated on the different types of employment, the difference between a benefits package and no benefits. Does it have health care? Does the job contribute to your 401k? What's the hourly rate? What's the salary? How many days off do I get? Is it paid leave? Is it unpaid leave? These are, now that I've had real jobs, these are the questions I know to ask about potential employment, but they are questions I had to learn the hard way because I wasn't educated on them as a girl growing up in the church, being told that the only reason I needed a degree is in case my husband died. And so, as I often say in my videos, education is power, because the more informed you are, that means you can make a more informed decision. And so because women aren't taught financial literacy, they're not taught about the different forms of employment and how to get a good job and what the different types of jobs even are, and all of these many different aspects of working in the outside world, they're just more easily duped into false promises of quick money. Like I said, I do find it frustrating when women are mocked for joining MLMs, because I truly just see a woman who's trying to earn a little bit of extra money, but also live up to her societal expectations to stay home with her kids. Another common joke about Mormon women in Utah is that they all have DSLRs, like the fancy, nicer cameras, and that they all want to be photographers. And it's kind of a trope, and I've heard it been used to mock women, like, why does every girl want to be a photographer? And the reason is because it's another version of a job that you can more easily do while being a stay-at-home parent, because you're taking photos in the evening, you're taking a few hours here, a few hours there. And so that's another example of something I've heard women be mocked for. Why do they all have cameras? But in it is a true attempt to both live up to this expectation of being a stay-at-home mom while trying to have a little bit of a career and make a little bit of money on the side. My next thought as to why Mormon women are more susceptible is the influencer culture and the hive mind culture that exists in Utah. I kind of already touched on it with the outfits and the aesthetics of the Mormon mom, and SNL even made a skit about this aesthetic because it is so popularized and common. In Mormon belief, there's something that's called the straight and narrow path, and the idea behind that is that there is one path back to God. And growing up, I would always see charts like this about the plan of salvation. The covenant path is another word for it, that there really is checkpoints along the way that you need to accomplish in order to get back to God, get back to heaven. The Book of Mormon also talks about something called the iron rod, and how in this dream Lehi has people who are holding and walking along the iron rod are the ones who get back to heaven, because they're holding fast to the doctrine and belief and standards of the church. This mentality, though, of a straight and narrow path, I think often manifests as people thinking there's really just one right way to do things. This is why Mormon women often all dress the same. I saw this video recently. This is girls showing off the dresses they chose to wear to General Conference, which is a big Mormon meeting. And as you can see, they're essentially wearing all the same dresses, and they almost look like sister wives all standing there hugging each other. And they've all picked the same design of dress. The length of the dress, the colors are all very pastel. And so I think that in the church, rather than promoting radical individualism or having everyone try to be unique and their own person, and everyone, has different hair and different styles of clothing and different, tattoos or however you're choosing to show your identity, rather than having that as a value, the value is very much, let's all be the same. Let's all copy each other. Let's use the same products. This is a reason why it's so common to see identical businesses popping up in Utah. The biggest example of this is Swig, which is the dirty soda shop that's most popular in Utah. There's also Fizz, Thirst. There's so many different types of variations, and they're all just soda mixed with different flavorings and mix-ins. It's the same business concept, but all of these people in Utah are copying each other, basically. And there's even been copyright suits around this. Another common one is Crumble, which most people are probably familiar with by now. Olivia Rodrigo did a partnership with them. Crumble and Dirty Dough got into something called the Cookie Wars because the business models are so similar that they both sued each other and said, we thought of it first, we should get the business plans. Copycat lawsuit, essentially. And so we have similar soda companies, similar cookie companies. Obviously, there's Young Living and doTERRA, which are both massive essential oil companies. There's also this company called Minky Couture, and there's multiple other blanket companies that are all more or less making the same types of blankets. And so this is really an instance of this copycat culture combined with the Mormon prosperity doctrine. And so once somebody sees an idea, everybody follows. And there's so many instances of these businesses that are designed the same way, they're structured the same way, they have similar branding, they have the same product. And this is a Utah-specific problem because everybody out there is copying each other. And so similarly to to how this hive mind culture makes all of them copy each other and this influencer culture, it means that if the MLM can get embedded within a community, it spreads like a virus because they're all sharing it with each other. If so-and-so has the water bottle, I want the water bottle. If this girl has this special type of hair product, I gotta have it too. And because they are all very much pursuing this same, there's one way to be perfect, there's one way to be hot, there's one way to look pretty, there's one way to be healthy, it means that once you can start a trend in Utah, your business will probably explode because everyone will buy it overnight and it will be very successful. This is also why I think MLM parties are so powerful. There's a lot of FOMO. You want to be on the top of trends. You don't want to miss out. And if there's a party, I mean, parties are really popular out there too. And you want to be invited because all of the girls will be there and everybody's going to be talking about this, what's hot right now and what procedures they're doing and what clothes they're dressing their kids in. And so this really creates this sense of urgency around being in the know so that you can be on top of the trend, so that you can be part of the group, and so that you are being perceived as being culturally as Mormon and as righteous as possible. In addition to what I already highlighted about the geographic nature of Mormon congregations and how you're really in touch with all of your neighbors, the church also has something called ministering. When I was in the church, it was called visiting teaching, but essentially you're assigned a companion, so another person, and then you are supposed to go visit that person or remember their birthday or bring them some brownies. And it's just a way for you to have someone, it's kind of like an assigned friend, basically. And so this further allows you to have more close connections. If you have somebody that you're visiting monthly and giving them cookies and stuff, and then maybe in one of your visits you mentioned this great product you just found out about, it really entrenches these relationships so that people feel more inclined to buy the product. In the church, there's also a relief society, so there's a specific meeting with adult women only, and so there's a lot of semi-forced interactions, there's a lot of female-only spaces, and so these types of businesses are really complemented by how often adult women are interacting with each other, talking to each other, asking to befriend each other, and it really just opens the net of the number of people or clients, of people you can sell to. I think it's also important to talk about grind set culture in Utah. As we're talking about how important it is to be wealthy out there, in all my years in the church, I never had a bishop that was not rich. You'd always go to the bishop's house and he had the fire pit, the boat, the big house. And if your bishop was pretty rich, then your stake president was very, very rich. And I think it's pretty common to see people talking about how when you're righteous, you're rewarded with more money. And I would often hear stories about how people would pay tithing. A favorite story that was passed around in my family was that there was this man that was starting a business, and he hired an accountant to look over the business's finances. And the accountant comes to him and says, "I see you're paying 10%. You're paying 10% to a charitable cause here." And he's like, "Yes, that's my church's tithing. And I'm going to keep paying it." And the man said, if you stop paying this tithing, you can probably scale your business so much more. And you should probably stop paying this 10% because it's going to make or break the business. And of course, because it's a beloved story, the man says, "I will not stop paying tithing." And the end of the story was that he received some massive client who had this huge order, and he made 10 times more than he ever had paid in tithing. And he attributed this blessing to the fact that he had been paying his dues to the Lord. And so I think when you see someone in the church that's high up, your bishop, your stake president, who's very successful, very wealthy, it reinforces this prosperity culture mindset, which is that if you're righteous, then you're rich. I think it's very safe to say that within Mormonism, money is seen as evidence of God's blessings, and the amount of money you have is pretty thoroughly tied with how righteous you are. And that concludes all of my theories as to why MLMs are so popular in Utah and how Mormons get so easily duped into businesses that are illegal pyramid schemes. The only other thing I had written down to mention is that just like Mormons will say the church is hashtag not a cult, you know, if you'll say, well, it seems like a little culty to be doing those temple ceremonies, they'll say, it's not a cult, it's my religion. And I feel like that's also a very common sentiment in MLMs, is that people will say, it's not an MLM, it's a legitimate business. And so it's funny, that's kind of what he said in the RM too. He's like, we're not doing NuSkin, this is legitimate. And so it's very common to see that same sentiment used to legitimize, well, it's not an MLM, it's not a cult, it's very above board, we just have secret handshakes. Thank you so much for watching. Just a quick reminder to like this video, subscribe to my channel. If you are personally in the process of leaving the Mormon Church, consider checking out my book, How to Leave the Mormon Church, which is the book I wrote about what it was like for me to leave the church, some of the things I learned along the way, how I told my family, and it just gives some basic advice for anyone who's choosing to leave the church, like how to order coffee for the first time. So if you're either leaving the church or you want to learn more about my story, I suggest checking out my book. If you have a theory about MLMs and pyramid schemes in Utah and amongst Mormons, don't forget to drop it below. If I forgot to add yet another cultural reason as to why this is such a big phenomenon, thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I will see you all next week.